Okay, well, let's dive into the demo here. First thing we're going to talk about is what we've leveraged. So we're leveraging the Azure CLI 2.0 command line tools. So here we're looking at their website, and it's got all the different commands you can use to automate a lot of these aspects. If we dive into things, I talked a little bit about environment variables earlier, so you can see here on my GitHub page, I've defined everything as environment variables. We're leveraging the Canada Central Data Center. We've created a resource group. Here are all our objects are defined in here. So this is going to allow us to rapidly get things started and hit the ground running. If we look here at one of our scripts, you can see we've started to define how we're going to provision all the different pieces of our Azure account. So we've defined a resource group. We're creating availability sets. So I'll talk a little bit more about availability sets later, but there are ways to start to stagger your infrastructure across Azure's backend. So if they have an outage or a failure, your entire tier of resources doesn't go down. So you have to leverage availability sets there. We've created a security group, so that's going to define all the ports that we open up to the outside world and how things are able to communicate inside and out. We've created some rules around what we're going to open up there. So if we look at the rest of the script here, we're going to also create some front-end ports for our load balancers. We're looking at what the security group is configured. We're able to verify that our storage account's been created, and I've cut a little bit of the script out, but essentially you'll see what it provisions. It's going to be quite a bit of time saver for us rather than clicking through the web UI. So we're going to run all this through Tower, our central place to run our automation from. So if you log into Tower, you can see we've got a web UI to see what's going on here, how many projects we have on the go. We're able to look at our inventory. So we've got some templates in here, and you can see we've got our Azure provisioning. If we look at a workflow editor, Ansible has added a workflow editor that allows us to run multiple playbooks together, and we can have them almost chain off each other. So if you run one playbook and it's successful, you'll go ahead and run the next. If it fails, then you may want it to do something else. You see here we've got our Azure resource playbook that's going to go and create all the resources that are required. So essentially we're starting from an empty account. And then we're going to provision all our Azure nodes. So that's all the virtual machines that are required to run our OpenShift platform. Details on that we can look at, but we'll jump right into it and we're going to run things. So if we look, there we go, the script is started and resource group, and we've created all our availability sets that we need. So we've got different availability sets. We've stood up a virtual network. So we've got an internal 10 network that we're leveraging. We've stand up our load balancers. So we've got a couple different load balancers, our infrastructure load balancer and our masters. And we've created a lot of virtual NICs. We've created a lot of public IPs. I've obviously sped this up a little bit for the sake of the demo, but all this has been automated through one script. So if we go back and look, that's going to go ahead and be successful. We move on to creating our nodes, so all the virtual machines that we need. So again, here's a small example of a piece of the script we're using. So we're using environment variables in a lot of cases, but we're going to go ahead and create a jump box that's going to be a bind NFS server for us. And then we create a master node underneath that. And we're able to create as many of these as we want. We just have to update this one file. So here's an example of it looking at my Git repository. So that script I showed you actually calls separate scripts like this. So we're creating our virtual machine. We're able to create all of our public IPs, define all that. We're able to attach disk to it. So this is saving us an enormous amount of time. We're also injecting an SSH key, so we'll be able to log into the system securely. So you can see we're creating our VMs. We've got our masters coming up, so that'll be a 3-node cluster. You're going to see some infrastructure nodes come up. That's where we're going to run a lot of our containers and our core services. And then we're going to boot up some application nodes. And that is the pool of resources we use when users are provisioning workloads inside our OpenShift container platform. So this takes a few minutes. We sped it up. You can look at all the different services we've created now. There's a mountain of them. You can imagine how long this would take and error prone to click through the web UI to do all this. So we've got a couple load balancers provisioned. So I'll talk a little bit. I mentioned availability sets. So in order to leverage availability sets, you have to define them up front, and we can define a front end pool. So essentially that's going to be, if you come in on this public IP, we're going to load balance you back to the back end IP. We've created rule sets. You can see up in the top right, we've got rule counts. All that is we've said what ports we're going to expose to the outside world. If we look at our backend pool, so you can see we've got 3 nodes in our availability set. So that's going to allow you to come in on the front end, and it's going to NAT you to these 3 VMs on the backside. And we can create health probes and different load balancing techniques and rules. So if one node goes down, we can obviously redirect traffic. Now, here's all the VMs we're leveraging for this environment. So we're going to jump in and configure those. Again, here's a storage VM. This machine's actually acting as an NFS server for our environment. So if we look at the diagram around the nodes, you can see we've created a storage node. It's got a front-end public IP. It's in an availability set. We'll have a boot disk. We've assigned 2 300 gig disks to it also. We've got it assigned to a security group, all the things that we need to do to ensure it's deployed properly. So again, this is what we've deployed. These are all the nodes. This is what the OpenShift platform looks like out of the box. So let's dive in and have a look at what it takes to provision this environment. So everything in OpenShift is configured off of this Ansible host file. So if you look at this file, we've defined a lot of things, like how we're going to configure it. You can see in this case, we're using Ansible _sudo is true. So we're not actually using root. We're using a become technique to be able to use elevated permissions. We've defined what we want our network to look like, how we want our registry. All our multi-node setup is defined in here. So I have a lot of scripts on this box that I used for various things. These all became a playbook in the end that we've run. Everything's run off a node list file. So we've got this node list file. Essentially, it's our inventory of all the nodes that we want to be able to provision and communicate to. So one of the nice features of OpenShift is they provide a lot of Ansible scripts out of the box. So these case we're running it just from an Ansible machine. We're not leveraging Tower. We certainly could run this from Tower as well. One of the scripts is collecting the OpenShift facts. So what that's going to do is pre-check our entire environment and make sure everything's in order and able to run, so we don't proactively do this before we have a lot of failures and have to do an uninstall. If you look here, we've gone through and checked everything we need to check, made a few changes to the environment, so we're ready to go. So here's a script we're going to run, and we're going to attach a VVV, which is just verbose, so we can see everything that's going on. So what this is going to do is it's going to leverage our node list for the nodes, and it's also going to read the Ansible file that I showed you earlier that's going to tell how to configure the environment, naming all the different things that we want to be able to do. Let's go ahead and run this. Now this is a pretty huge script. You'll see here at the end of actually how many plays that goes through. I've obviously cut out a lot of the wait time here, but what this does, it goes and configures and installs every single node, all the requirements, all the different pieces of OpenShift. So you can imagine what this is like doing manually or having to run these playbooks individually. It would be quite a task. So this is a huge help to be able to leverage the script. So if we look at this, you can see how many plays it's actually run. I mean, on the master one, it's run 601 playbooks. And you can see everything's passed here, so we know that we're good to go. So now that that's installed, we can do some basic kind of health checks on the environment. So we can look at our nodes. We can make sure everything's good to go there. We can log into our container platform environment, so it's available through our load balancers automatically. I just generally update the DNS rule on whoever you're using for an external name provider. You can go ahead and log in. We've created some base users, and you can see we've automatically created a lot of projects, and we've deployed some important aspects when it comes from the operational tooling side. So here you can see we've deployed a logging project. So that comes with a lot of different pieces, including FluentD, Curator. You'll see we've also deployed some metrics later, but this is our full internal logging stack. We can also log out to a third party. We've deployed the registry and the registry console, as well as some load balancers to handle all the load balancing into the environment. So you can see here we've provisioned an endpoint for our registry console. So one of the new features in OpenShift is to be able to have a visual view of your registry. So these are all the Docker containers that are images that we've got available for our users, and different versioning. Obviously, we've can version things and tag things in a certain way and be able to leverage multiple registries if you want. One use case is sometimes people replace this registry with Satellite, or maybe Artifactory is something that they leverage inside their enterprise today. So that gave you kind of a quick view of how to provision all this. Obviously, we've shortened it up a little bit and made it quite a bit faster, but it just shows you can have a couple scripts, you can stand up an entire infrastructure, all the pieces that are required, including security and load balancing and networking, and as well as a full container platform. So next demo in this blog is going to be handing things over to Daniyal, and Daniyal's going to show what it's like to leverage the OpenShift platform from a developer perspective and start to drive some of that automation that everybody's trying to get to. So I'll let you check that video out. Hope you enjoyed this.